Oh boy, it's that Apple sheep time of the year again. We're all gonna get excited because the next Apple keynote is merely 1 month away. Worldwide Developers Conference. There's reason to be excited because this is content coming from Apple that is free. Software is all free, goes to all of our devices, makes them feel fresh, gives us new features, and of course, it costs us nothing. This is just one of the big Apple perks that you Android people don't get to be a part of. Suck it! So before I get started into what I wish we will see, I'm not calling this a predictions video. The reason I'm not is because software is so hard to predict. There's no leaks. There's no evidence really I can base any predictions off of. That wouldn't be interesting. I am just going to be listing what I want to happen. It likely won't, and I'm probably entirely wrong with what I wish would happen, but I'm the Apple sheep. I can still dream, and you can too. You can let me know in the comments, or on Twitter, or Instagram. A lot of people forget I'm on Instagram. I make those Instagramish kind of posts on there about the Apple stuff. But anyway, before I get started, I want to mention a couple things you will not be seeing. The iPhone 8. Don't get your hopes up about that. Some people thought they'd be unveiling it super early in the year. No, don't expect that. This is highly unlikely, but probably don't expect any iPads. We thought we were gonna get 3 new iPad Pros earlier in the year, and that didn't happen, but it's most likely those have been delayed till later in the winter so that they can be alongside the new edge-to-edge iPhone, and they'll have all the hardware come out at the end of the year right before the holidays. Plus, WWDC doesn't really focus on hardware often at all. Everything is kind of primarily focused on the software, and if there is hardware, it'll be a surprise, and it'll be little nuggets, not major releases. It'll be something little. So, keeping that in mind, here is my wish list for the 4 greatest operating systems in the world. iOS, macOS, watchOS, and tvOS. In that order. Now keep in mind this was very hard for me to create because I'm so used to the way my operating systems work already that it's kind of hard to invent ways they could be better without straying from the Apple formula. So forgive me if my wish list is a little barren. So when it comes to macOS, the first big change I want is something I wanted in the last operating system update. In the Messages app, which I use a lot because I can SMS text people from my Mac, and of course I message people. It's really easy, it's really fun, but they did not bring the cool animations and send text effects that they put on iOS 10 last year. You know, with the celebration stuff, the loud effect, the slam effect, and the on-screen animation. They didn't do any of that. Even though, like, it's a full-fledged laptop. These things have Intel i7 cores, they have dedicated GPUs, but they couldn't handle, like, simple little on-screen animations. Instead, when you send something on there, it just says, sent with confetti, sent with slam effect. Like, that gives the same point across. No, give a more seamless experience across all of your devices. Apple could even fit those on-screen effects or those animations in watchOS. It's one of those few things that the Apple Watch can do that a MacBook can't. That shouldn't work like that. Fix it, Apple. Next thing for macOS is I want it to look a bit more uniform with iOS. Don't get me wrong, it's practically the same. It is very close. Last year they did a great job at kind of merging all of the gaps between the 4 different operating systems. They all have a similar style, a similar look, but you know, the dock of macOS is kind of rounded on the corners, and the dock on our iPads and iPhones is kind of flat. If they could merge that together and make the applications on the bottom go edge to edge just so it kind of matches iOS a little bit. And you know, the writing we have on the top of our phone, what if we spaced it on macOS the same way so that time is in the center, then on the side we have battery and Bluetooth, and then on the other side, of course, you can have your Apple Finder, file edit, you know, all that regular stuff. There's probably some tweaks you can do already to make your Mac already kind of look like that, but I would like it to be built in. I would kind of like a nice refresh. Maybe the folders on the desktop kind of look like the folders in iOS. They're kind of rounded rectangles. You open them up and your files can be arranged the same way in there, but just a more uniform experience. Kind of match the look of iOS a little more, which I get. You know, more loyal OS 10 users would hate that, but Apple's already committed to this iOS bit being, you know, the king. iOS is priority, so macOS, make it a tad more like that. That way, if Apple ever does get courageous and starts to merge iOS and macOS together to create one massive Apple OS, the transition would not be as difficult as they are slowly merging us to a desktop/touchscreen interface. That will be perfected, not like Windows 10. That is not it, but Apple would get it right. Now let's get into iOS. There's a few obvious ones. The biggest, of course, is dark mode. The iPhone 8 going to be sporting an OLED display. It could save battery and also just look really cool to have dark mode on our iPhones. There's already jailbreaks that can do that, that's fine. But one I asked for in my last iOS 11 wish list was when we are recording videos in the camera app, just let us force touch the part where it says what frame rate we're at, what resolution we're at. Let us force touch that, and it gives us the different options within the camera app. There are some times I want to film something at 1080 at 60, sometimes at 4K, and it'd be really easy to just switch between those if we could just take advantage of that 3D touch. But right now we have to leave that app, go to settings, change it in there, and it's just too many steps. It could be easily fixed. Next is another obvious one, control center customization. People have theorized this for ages. Being able to 3D touch different things in control center, which Apple already does with the flashlight icon, like change your Wi-Fi networks, or 3D touch the Bluetooth icon and you can see your different devices you want to pair to. That would make that going to the settings step also go away, so we don't have to always be jumping back to that to switch our Bluetooth devices. Or when you 3D touch the do not disturb button, you can set how long you want it to turn on. That's kind of a nifty thing Android has. When you turn on do not disturb, you can set it for 1 hour and then it'll turn off for 2 hours. Apple, you could do the same thing. Perhaps on the bottom you could have another row of favorites apps that you always like to go to. Something like that. Control center is very easy. It's at the bottom of the phone, so it's really simple to access just by swiping up. Expand that a little bit more. Another one I really like that you can do on Android, and I would love to do on iOS, and I have seen a few people do this for concept art, is remove tags. As in, when you're on the home screen, every single app has to have its name underneath it. I think this gets a little cluttered, and it really isn't necessary, as most of us know what the Twitter app looks like, we know what the Instagram app looks like, we know what the music app looks like. Just remove all those tags. It would look so much more minimalistic, and I think Apple enjoys that. It just makes for a cleaner home screen. And of course, you don't have to have this automatically turned on. You can go into the settings and turn it off, but just give users the option to remove those tags for a more clean looking home screen. Now let's get into my wish list for watchOS 4. This is a tricky one. Lots of people have asked me about it, and the reason it's a tough one is because there's only so much you can do on your watch. It's such a small screen. I really had no clue what they were going to do with watchOS 3, and when that came out, blew my mind away. I was like, man, Scribble! That makes so much sense. It's so clever. So when people started asking me what's going to be on watchOS 4, I was like, man, I have no clue. So I've thought a little bit. These aren't major updates, but they would be cool. First of all, straight out the door, more watch faces. It's apparent that Apple is not interested in supporting third-party Apple Watch faces. I used to be against that, but now I'm okay with it because having used an Android Wear smartwatch, I understand that when third parties take control of the watch face, it usually looks pretty ugly and it's not very clean looking. Apple just wants to be in control of that. They want to say, no, if you're wearing our hardware, we want to make sure the stuff on the screen looks good. And with Android, it's kind of you can get pretty crazy with the third party. So Apple keeps us in a box of customization, but to be fair, the watch faces they give are pretty diverse and have lots of little complications you can mess with. Plenty to stylize with. And of course, I'd love to see that just expand with way more options, but there's an annoying thing where if you force touch on your Apple Watch and you're looking through all the different watch faces, you have to keep swiping with your finger over and over again. And see, a similar animation happens when you press the multitasking button, except with multitasking, you can use the digital crown to scroll through your apps. All the apps that are running, you can just scroll. You can't do that with watch faces. This would be a really easy fix. You could do that, then you could just scroll through all your watch faces with the digital crown, which is much more faster, much more efficient, and it would be a quick little fix. This doesn't even have to be in watchOS 4. This could just come out tomorrow. The next thing is something I actually liked about watchOS 2 and watchOS 1. See, in the old days, we had glances, so you would swipe up and have a bunch of different options to look at. And back then, I loved being able to swipe up and having the now playing glance available. So it has play, rewind, fast forward, and the volume. Now the now playing app, I keep in my dock, which means I have to press the multitasking button to access, then select that app, and then I have control over volume, rewind, fast forward, pause. That was actually pretty intuitive, and I really like the multitasking features they have on watchOS 3 now, but I would prefer it if we brought Control Center to the watchOS. So I like that when you swipe up right now, you have little quick settings, do not disturb, silent, theater mode, ejecting the water, all that. But similar to Control Center on iOS, what if when you swiped up, you could swipe to the side again and have your glances? Maybe not 8 of them, maybe just 2 or 3. But all I really want is to be able to swipe up with my nose and then pause the music that's playing. I did that a lot on watchOS 2, and now I have to press a button. It's just an extra step that I think could be handled better. So just have a couple of little slides in that Control Center section of the Apple Watch where, you know, where you swipe up. Earlier, I mentioned I would like to see dark mode on iOS, which would be cool. It would give a fresh, clean look to Apple Music, our messages, everything would look really neat, kind of stealthy, and probably easier on the eyes. I understand it's not easier on the battery life, but I don't care. Battery's great on here. But you see, my battery is also amazing on my Apple Watch. Usually by the end of the day, I've not even hit 50%. So what I'd love to see as an option, it's not turned on by default, but as an option, what if we brought light mode to the watchOS? So right now, if you're navigating through messages or settings or something on the Apple Watch, everything is very dark and gray, and that's typically to preserve battery life, but I'm saying battery life is so great on my Apple Watch, what if you brought all those black sections to color, had them all white, similar to how it is on iOS 10 right now? The backgrounds are are all white, we have blue buttons. It's a nice familiar look, and if we brought that to the watch, it would be a more uniform, seamless experience. It would make bezels more obvious, yes, and I'm not saying you have to use that mode. I'm just saying I would like to see light mode the same way menus and messages are displayed on my phone in the same color scheme on my watch. And since we are bringing light to the Apple Watch so that not every single menu is super dark, you know, can't you imagine like the home screen right now on the watchOS? There's a bunch of apps on black. What if the Apple Watch automatically knew what your wallpaper was on your iPhone, blurred that wallpaper, and made it the background of your home screen? Because obviously you're not going to be able to see the wallpaper very well, all the apps are covering it, but you could just put a little Gaussian blur on it and put it behind on the home screen. It would just be a more recognizable look, and it would make watchOS feel a bit more fresh. It would be a noticeable change. If someone had that turned on, you could look at their watch and be like, hey, they have watchOS 4. And since we are bringing color, wouldn't a great feature on the Apple Watch be a flashlight? It's something they had on Android Wear. It's one of the few things Android Wear does that I kind of like. Back when I had my Huawei watch, I could go to quick settings on there and hit a light and the screen would just turn on full brightness, and I could use my watch as a pretty decent flashlight. It's a very bright screen, and if they just turned it on white all the way and when you tap it again it turns off, that'd be a great way to see when it's dark. I try to do that all the time. A lot of the times when I'm coming home and it's late at night and people are asleep and it's dark in the house, I keep having to tap my watch face over and over again because I'm using that as a light, just for when your phone's in your pocket and you don't want to bring it out or something. Now, lastly, tvOS 11. There's very little I have for this one, but it would make a major difference. Picture in picture. Have it built into every single app, YouTube, Netflix, Twitchy, whatever you're using on the tvOS. If they had a little button on the bottom of the menu that allowed you to pop that out of the screen so that while you're playing video games, while you're browsing online stores, retail on tvOS, you can also be watching your favorite YouTube videos, Netflix shows, just be multitasking. I love it on my iPad, I love it on my Mac, and it would make sense to bring it on the TV because that's such a massive display and that TV can do a lot. I would love to watch my YouTube videos while playing Alto's Adventure. That would be amazing. And the last thing I have for you today on tvOS would be, you know, when someone texts us, we get a notification on our watch, our phone, our iPad, our Mac, but we don't get something on the TV. What if we're watching a TV and we're charging our watch and our phone, those are all put away, but someone texts us with an important message? I'm not saying this should be on by default, but it could be an option that while you're watching TV, you could have your little iMessage notification slide in. Be really subtle, not take up too much space on the screen. Maybe it comes up from the bottom or the top, but it's just a little text message with who texted you and a little bit of a message in there, just so you get that alert. Maybe if Apple doesn't want it to be too distracting, they could have in one of the corners or maybe on the top a little red dot appear when you have a notification, similar to what you have on the Apple Watch. You could then swipe down on the remote and view what that notification is for about 10 seconds. The dot will be there for 10 seconds. And if they swipe down on the remote during that 10 seconds, they see the notification. And if they don't react to it after that 10 seconds, the dot will just go away. Something really simple like that so that when you're watching TV, you can be notified. I feel like the Xbox and PlayStation do that kind of thing, and Apple has a really great ecosystem, so it of course would make sense to have notifications on everything. Now I bet there's one thing you think I forgot. There's one thing that should be a part of all of these operating systems. They'll also be on a piece of hardware next month. Siri. Siri is so dumb. Yes, I understand. Siri is behind the game, behind Alexa, behind the Google Assistant, even Cortana in certain tests. Siri needs a massive overhaul, and Apple has said that AI is a big part of their future, so yes. Across all four of these operating systems, I would love to see a massive Siri overhaul. Make her understand context, make her smarter, just like expand on the knowledge so that she can answer basic questions, make her hear you faster because Siri is on all of these devices and she's in desperate need of a takeover. She's the most accessible digital assistant. If they could make her as good or better than the Google Assistant, you will have the best digital assistant out there. And of course, that's the last thing. We will be seeing a smart speaker. I'm hoping that will be we have one more thing. To showcase what Siri's capabilities are, they're going to release a hopefully mobile smart speaker. It might just be stationary. It might be a smart home appliance that is basically a direct Amazon Echo competitor, Google Home competitor. Watch my video on the Siri smart speaker to read more about it, but that's what I'm expecting to see at WWDC 17. What are your predictions? Let me know in the comments below, or wish list, I should say. No one really knows. Love to hear them all. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.